Ethical codes is another key element of religion. Religions have ethical or moral codes, referring to guidelines concerning how humans ought to relate to the divine, relate one another, or behave towards one another, God, gods, and revered teachers. In some cases, these codes also include rules about what types of food not to eat, what type of clothes to wear on specific occasions, and others. Some of these ethical codes are revealed by a God to chosen messengers, while some are realized through a heightened form of spirituality activity like meditation. The next videos are some examples and information about ethics in religion.
One of the important functions of religion is to help us decide what actions are right and wrong. This is ethics. Every religion has an ethical framework, meaning a system of rules and principles designed to guide the choices of adherents. An ethical rule, or code, is a set of clearly defined do's and don'ts that adherents are supposed to follow. A great example of an ethical code in the Jewish and Christian traditions is the Ten Commandments. Thou shalt not steal is pretty clear. Thou shalt not commit adultery, etc. Every religion has these sorts of rules. They're usually designed to help adherents avoid wrongdoing and to encourage virtuous behaviour. They also help to keep the social structure together. Can you imagine if everyone was stealing from each other all the time? An ethical principle is slightly different. These are ideas or guidelines that need to be applied to life. Most religions have a version of the principle, do unto others as you would have them do to you. This principle encourages an ethical way of thinking in which we put ourselves in another's place. How this applies will differ in each situation. The Catholic tradition teaches the principle of a preferential option for the poor. This principle is based on Christ's demand to care for the least. This ethical principle is put into action through charity and hospitals, schools, and simple actions of care for the elderly and sick. There is no ethical code stating, thou shalt build hospitals. This action emerges naturally from the principle of a preferential option for the poor. So ethics can be thought of as what is considered morally right and wrong in a particular situation. It can be split up into explicit rules or codes and more general principles.
Everywhere I turn, I'm so confused, so many kinds of rules. All these crazy people up in my grill always telling me what to do. But Mo, did you know that your biblical code that you read from a cold stone rock would be the ultimate do's and don'ts for everyone on our block? Keep it simple, back to basics, with a story all began. A decalogue, that's 10 for the road, 10 commandments for the women and men. All one. Give it up for God who led you out of Egypt. 2. No other God takes first place, don't find a new relationship. 3. Hey, watch how you say God's name. Respect. Say while you're praying. 4. We'll all take a holy break. The Sabbath is just for playing. Shout 'em out. Old school rules. 1 to 10 out. Coming new. Hey, I see it. Shout 'em out. Everyone, count back from 10 to shout 'em out. Shout 'em out. And live out loud. 5. Treat your parents well and live it up a long, long time. 6. Don't kill. You don't get to decide who lives on time. 7. Don't cheat in over in life. 8. Your words, don't steal. It'll come back to you and you know it ain't right.
You know, if everyone actually listened to what the 10 Commandments were saying,
Especially number 9 and 10.
there'd be a lot less problems in the world.
Shout 'em out. Old school rules. 1 to shout 'em out. Coming new. Hey, I see it. Shout 'em out. Everyone, count back from 10 to shout 'em out. Shout 'em out. Number 9, don't lie. It always hurts in the end. Wouldn't do it to your mother or your best friend. Learn to love all you have. Jealousy never wins. Don't want what isn't yours. No. That's number 10. 10. Shout 'em out. Old school rules. 1 to shout 'em out. Coming new. Hey, I see it. Shout 'em out. Everyone, count back from 10 to shout 'em out. Now shout 'em out. Old school rules. 1 to shout 'em out. Coming new. Hey, I see it. Shout 'em out. Everyone, count back from 10 to shout 'em out. Shout 'em out.
Community. Religions have communities. A religious belief system is shared and practiced by a community of believers. The community of believers usually involves an organization consisting of a hierarchy of authorities. Each level in the hierarchy has designated rights and duties. How people get to occupy the higher positions vary in different religions. The ways include revelations, reincarnations, blood relations, and election by revered members of the religious community.
The social structure of religion is simply the way people are organised. This includes special roles and responsibilities for different people, plus the bigger organisations within a religion, like charities and schools. Importantly, every member of a religion is part of the social structure and may occupy several roles within it. Most religions have one or more official leaders and a system of authority leading down to ordinary adherents. This is called a hierarchical system, or just a hierarchy. In some religions this is really clear-cut. In others, it's less obvious. Let's have a simple look at the most obviously hierarchical social structure, the Catholic Church. The head of the social structure on earth is the Pope. Oh, hang on, he's usually a bit happier than that, isn't he? Yep, that's better. He is elected by cardinals, who are themselves chosen from amongst the bishops. Each bishop leads a diocese which is served by many priests, who look after the parishes of Catholic families and individuals worldwide. Each of these positions, plus the many not listed, such as members of religious orders like nuns and brothers, have their special roles and responsibilities. Most religions, including the Catholic Church, affirm the utmost importance of families in the structure of the religion. Religions are so keen on this that governments allow them to form new families by celebrating weddings. This Catholic structure helps to keep teaching and liturgy consistent, ensures poorer parishes get support from rich ones, and maintains unity. Because of this worldwide social structure, regardless of the language spoken or the cultural background of the parish, every Catholic hears the same scripture readings on the same day at Mass every week. As well as setting special roles for each member of the social structure, religions often maintain organisations. Most obviously, all religions operate charitable organisations, often serving the wider community. In Australia, medical care is provided by Catholic and Orthodox and Salvation Army and Protestant, Jewish and Muslim organisations. In fact, the Catholic Church alone runs 75 hospitals and 550 aged care homes. These are all part of the social structure. Religions also organise overseas charity structures, so that richer adherents can help to provide for the needs of poorer people overseas. Examples of this are World Jewish Relief, Islamic Aid, and Caritas. These organisations help adherents put their beliefs about care for the poor into action. An obvious part of the social structure of religions in Australia is the network of schools run by each faith. Teachers are trained to pass on the beliefs and practices of the religion, and families rely on these to help them form and educate their children. Many of you watching this might be attending one. Any other organisation run by a religion is also part of its social structure. These might include sports clubs and social groups and youth groups and bingo nights and legal aid groups and UN advocacy groups and music programs, just to name a few. So, the social structure is the way we organise the people within a tradition. This includes the roles each person fulfills in the hierarchical structure and the organisations within the faith.
Sacred writings. Religion's sacred writings, which contain their main teachings or doctrines, central stories, ethical codes, and prophecies. Sacred writings are divinely inspired. Their contents are usually revealed by a god or gods through chosen messengers. In some cases, they are arrived at by revered teachers as realizations during spiritual activities like meditation. Sometimes mere recitation of passages in the sacred writings can already produce religious effects like blessings, forgiveness, spiritual calmness, and power to overcome sin and fear or to exorcise evil spirits. Sometimes, too, the mere presence or sight or a scared book is enough to produce these religious effects.
When we think of religious texts, we tend to think of the Bible and the Quran, the big ones. However, religions rely on other texts as well. The big texts like the Bible are called the foundational texts of a religious tradition. They are the texts on which the whole religion rests. Importantly, adherents usually believe that they're revealed to humans by God, or the gods, or at least divinely inspired. For example, while the Quran was made known by Muhammad, he claimed to have received the words directly from God. Similarly, while Christians acknowledge that specific people wrote the books of the Bible, they claim that these authors were inspired by God, and so the authors didn't make any errors. No other text can contradict a foundational one. Many religious traditions have other important texts that comment on or add value to the foundational texts. Jews have the Mishnah and other writings which explain the Torah. Muslims have the Hadith, the sayings of the prophets. Catholics have the writings of the Pope, encyclicals, and the Catechism, which try to apply the teachings of Christ to practical situations. Interestingly, one of the foundations of Protestant Christianity is that truth is in Scripture alone, and therefore no other secondary texts can be held as divinely inspired. In addition to these texts, religions rely on thousands of other minor texts. These are books by adherents, which, while not necessarily authoritative, help the adherents to understand the tradition. These include histories, stories, books on theology, and the lives of important figures. In the Catholic tradition, authors of these books can even apply to have their texts ruled nil obstat, meaning without error. As you can see, there are 3 levels of texts in a tradition. Foundational texts, revealed or inspired by God, secondary texts, official or perhaps divinely inspired, and other texts, written by adherents.
Along the shores of the Dead Sea, 3 Bedouin shepherds were tending their flocks when one of their goats strayed from the herd. Thinking it had wandered into a cave, one of them threw a stone to scare the animal out. The unexpected sound sparked their curiosity, and inside, the young shepherds uncovered clay jars that contained one of the greatest archaeological discoveries of the 20th century. The oldest biblical texts ever found, the first of the Dead Sea Scrolls. The scrolls were handwritten some 2,000 years ago on durable animal skin parchment, with a few written on papyrus. They were mostly composed in Hebrew from right to left, with sheets written in columns, then sewn together, creating a single scroll. For safekeeping, some of them would be wrapped in linen and encapsulated in tall jars. The scroll was eventually replaced by the Codex as the format for Christian manuscripts. They were made by folding sheets of papyrus and stitching them together. As time passed, codices began to grow larger and more complex. During the medieval period, books were reproduced by hand. Monks spent their days copying texts in Latin and Greek, while others illustrated the pages. It was a grueling process that required great skill and training. The books were very expensive. To illuminate the text, they used various pigments and gold leaf. And the pages could require the hides of hundreds of sheep or calves. But it was the introduction of the printing press that transitioned the Bible from the Middle Ages into the early modern world. This invention revolutionized book production, ultimately making the Bible available to the masses. Today, it is the best-selling book of all time. Inside its pages, you can find the stories of the creation of the world, Noah's Ark and the flood, Moses receiving the 10 Commandments, the construction of Solomon's temple, the birth of Jesus, his crucifixion and resurrection, the Holy Spirit coming to the apostles, and many more. Large portions of these biblical stories are represented in 400 of the oldest manuscripts studied so far. Although a few are complete, most are either incomplete or fragments. Today, the search for more manuscripts continues. What other treasures, like the Dead Sea Scrolls, are yet to be found?
Lifestyle and communication of ants. Consider the following Quranic verse. And before Sulaiman were marshaled his hosts of jinn and men and birds, and they were all kept in order and ranks. At length, when they came to a lowly valley of ants, one of the ants said, O ye ants, get into your habitations, lest Sulaiman and his hosts crush you underfoot without knowing it. Al-Quran, chapter 27, verses 17 and 18. In the past, some people would have probably mocked at the Quran, taking it to be a fairy tale book in which ants talk to each other and communicate sophisticated messages. In recent times, research has shown us several facts about the lifestyle of ants, which were not known earlier to mankind. Research has shown that the animals or insects whose lifestyle is closest in resemblance to the lifestyle of human beings are in fact the ants. This can be seen from the following findings regarding ants. A. The ants bury their dead in a manner similar to humans. B. They have a sophisticated system of division of labor, whereby they have managers, supervisors, foremen, workers, etc. C. Once in a while, they meet amongst themselves to have a chat. D. They have an advanced method of communication amongst themselves. E. They hold regular markets wherein they exchange goods. F. They store grains for long periods in winter, and if the grain begins to bud, they cut the roots, as if they understand that if they leave it to grow, it will rot. If the grains stored by them get wet due to rains, they take these grains out into the sunlight to dry, and once these grains are dry, they take them back inside as though they know that humidity will cause development of root systems and thereafter rotting of the grain. Everything made in pairs. And of everything we have created pairs. Al-Quran, chapter 51, verse 49. This refers to things other than humans, animals, plants, and fruits. It may also be referring to a phenomenon like electricity, in which the atoms consist of negatively and positively charged electrons and protons. Glory to Allah, who created in pairs all things that the earth produces, as well as their own humankind and other things of which they have no knowledge. Al-Quran, chapter 36, verse 36. The Quran here states that everything is created in pairs, including things that the humans do not know at the present and may discover later. Animals and birds live in communities. There is not an animal that lives on the earth, nor a being that flies on its wings, but forms part of communities like you. Al-Quran, chapter 6, verse 38. Research has shown that animals and birds live in communities, i.e. they organize and live and work together. Barrier between sweet and salt waters. Consider the following Quranic verse. He has let free the two bodies of flowing water, meeting together. Between them is a barrier which they do not transgress. Al-Quran, chapter 55, verses 19 and 20. In the Arabic text, the word barzakh means a barrier or a partition. This barrier is not a physical partition. The Arabic word maraja literally means they both meet and mix with each other. Early commentators of the Quran were unable to explain the two opposite meanings for the two bodies of water, i.e., they meet and mix, and at the same time, there is a barrier between them. Modern science has discovered that in the places where two different seas meet, there is a barrier between them. This barrier divides the two seas so that each sea has its own temperature, salinity, and density. Oceanologists are now in a better position to explain this verse. There is a slanted, unseen water barrier between the two seas through which water from one sea passes to the other. But when the water from one sea enters the other sea, it loses its distinctive characteristic and becomes homogenized with the other water. In a way, this barrier serves as a transitional homogenizing area for the two waters. This scientific phenomenon mentioned in the Quran was also confirmed by Dr. William Hay, who was a well-known marine scientist and professor of geological sciences at the University of Colorado. The Quran mentions this phenomenon also in the following verse. And made a separating bar between the two bodies of flowing water. Al-Quran, chapter 27, verse 61. This phenomenon occurs in several places, including the divider between the Mediterranean and the Atlantic Ocean at Gibraltar. But when the Quran speaks about the divider between fresh and salt water, it mentions the existence of a forbidding partition with the barrier. It is He who has let free the two bodies of flowing water, one palatable and sweet, and the other salty and bitter, yet He has made a barrier between them, and a partition that is forbidden to be passed. Al-Quran, chapter 25, verse 53. Modern science has discovered that in estuaries, where fresh, sweet, and salt water meet, the situation is somewhat different from that found in places where two seas meet. It has been discovered that what distinguishes freshwater from saltwater in estuaries is a pynocline zone with a marked density discontinuity separating the two layers. This partition, or zone of separation, has salinity different from both the freshwater and the saltwater. This phenomenon occurs in several places, including Egypt, where the river Nile flows into the Mediterranean Sea. The presence of interstellar matter. Space outside organized astronomical systems was earlier assumed to be a vacuum. Astrophysicists later discovered the presence of bridges of matter in this interstellar space. These bridges of matter are called plasma and consist of completely ionized gas containing equal number of free electrons and positive ions. Plasma is sometimes called the fourth state of matter, besides the three known states of solid, liquid, and gas. The Quran mentions the presence of this interstellar material in the following verse: He who created the heavens and the earth and all that is in between. Al-Quran 25:59. It would be ridiculous for anybody to even suggest that the presence of interstellar galactic material was known 1400 years ago.
Central stories. Religions have central stories. Some scholars refer to these stories as myths, but due to a connotation of the term myth as being a story that is purely imaginary or that is historically untrue, we shall use the, hopefully, neutral term story. The central stories of religions include accounts of how the world and the human race, or chosen human race, began. How God was personified or manifested in the world. How a great teacher came to a god, the gods, or the heavens. How the important events in the life of a great teacher came about. And how some actions of faithful followers, like acts of martyrdom, became worthy of emulation or sources of religious inspiration.
How Islam began in under 10 minutes. Not a problem. We've started. Okay, so travel back in time with me to a land far, far away and long, long ago. Mecca and Arabia, about the year 570. Mecca is important for two reasons. One, the Kaaba is there, an ancient temple built to worship God. And two, Muhammad, peace be upon him, was born in Mecca. Now, problem. I can't show you Muhammad, because it wouldn't be right. I'll tell you why in a bit. But in the meantime, here's his name in Arabic. Nice. Back in the day, Mecca was a lawless place. The only way to be safe was to have backup. Lots of rich big brothers who'd beat up anyone who got in your way. So the place was ruled by the most powerful families who could do pretty much what they wanted. And religion didn't help. By this time, the Kaaba had been filled to overflowing with 360 idols that did nothing to help anyone. So it was a tough place to grow up if, like Muhammad, you were a poor orphan and believed in just one God you couldn't see, like the Jews and the Christians. He called him Allah, the God, in Arabic there. Muhammad's dad died before he was even born, and his mum died when he was just 6. So he was brought up by his grandfather, Abdul Muttalib, and then, when he died too, by his uncle, Abu Talib, who had the respect of the city's ruling families, so Muhammad was safe for the time being. Muhammad started out as a shepherd and then became a businessman travelling about buying and selling stuff for rich clients. When he did some work for a rich widow called Khadija, she was so impressed by his honesty and skill that they ended up getting married, and for a while it looked like Muhammad was going places. Well, he was, but not how you think. Every year in the month of Ramadan, different calendar, different names for the months, there was a big party around the Kaaba when people made sacrifices to the idols. Muhammad hated it, so he'd get out of town and sleep in a cave he'd found on top of a nearby mountain. One night, Muhammad's praying to Allah when wham! There's the angel Jibreel, you might say Gabriel, standing right in front of him. Read, says the angel, but Muhammad couldn't read. No schools, you see. Jibreel keeps on at him. 3 times he says, read. Then he grabs hold of Muhammad and wham! Again, it's like Muhammad's learnt the words off by heart. So he recites the message out loud. Read in the name of your Lord, who created man from a drop of blood. Read, for your Lord is most generous. He who taught by the pen, taught man what he did not know. It was a message from Allah. God was speaking to him just like he'd spoken to the prophets in the Jewish and Christian holy books, which meant he was a prophet too. The messages continued for the rest of Muhammad's life. Allah gave him the words to say and the prophet recited them. The words were written down by his friends, and years later they were collected together and became the Muslim holy book, the Quran, which means recitation, because Muhammad recited it, you see? Anyway, that was much later, so back to the night of power. Muhammad tells his family, then his friends, and eventually everyone about Allah, that he's the one and only God, that he wants everyone to be treated fairly, and long story short, it didn't go down well with the ruling families of Mecca, who liked things just the way they were, thank you very much. You see, Islam means obedience to Allah, and Muslim means someone who obeys Allah, and the ruling families didn't want anyone obeying anyone else but them. So the people who believed in Muhammad's message, the Muslims, were given a hard time. Some were even tortured and killed. A few of them managed to escape to Abyssinia, Ethiopia. But most were stuck in Mecca. Muhammad also had to cope with the death of his wife, and then just a few weeks later, his uncle too. Feeling very down, he went to the Kaaba to pray to Allah one night. Then, the weirdest thing happened. Jibreel turns up, sits him on a winged horse called Al-Buraq and flies him all the way from Mecca to Jerusalem. He prays with all the prophets who have ever lived. Then, he's taken up to the heavens to chat with some of the prophets, and then into paradise itself, where Allah tells Muhammad to pray 5 times a day and to stay strong. He's returned to Jerusalem and then flies back to the Kaaba in Mecca. We call it the night journey, and Muslims still argue whether it was a real experience or a vision, but whatever, it gave Muhammad a much needed boost, and just as well, because there were more tough times ahead. So, there was this other city called Yathrib. The people there heard about Muhammad and his message and invited him and his followers to join them. A few at a time, the Muslims left Mecca and made a dangerous journey across the desert to Yathrib. It's known as a hijra, which means migration, like birds do. Muhammad and a few of his friends stayed in Mecca until everyone had got away and then made plans for their own escape. But the ruling families wanted to kill Muhammad while they still could, so 7 sons, one from each family, was sent in the middle of the night to stab the Prophet while he slept. But he was way ahead of them, and when they burst into the house, Muhammad was gone. Trackers were sent out to hunt him down. Muhammad and his best friend Abu Bakr took a roundabout route to try and shake off the pursuit, but the trackers were too good and slowly gained on them. So Muhammad and Abu Bakr hid in a cave and prayed that no one found them. The trackers found the cave all right, but they didn't bother going in to search. There was no way Muhammad could be inside, they thought. There was a spider's web over the mouth of the cave and a nesting bird at the entrance. He must have given them the slip. So off they went, leaving Muhammad and Abu Bakr protected by a spider and a bird. Muhammad made it safely to Yathrib, which was renamed Medina al-Nabi, the city of the Prophet, but most people just call it Medina. But Muhammad's worries weren't over yet. There were 3 big battles between the Muslims and the Meccans. First, the Battle of Badr, when Muhammad and just 313 men faced 1,000 Meccan soldiers. Miraculously, the Muslims won. Then there was the Battle of Uhud, which didn't go so well. Some of Muhammad's men disobeyed his orders and ran off during the battle to raid the Meccans' camp, and so the Muslims were outmaneuvered. Then there was the Battle of the Trench. Medina was protected on 3 sides by mountains, so when the Meccan forces advanced in the city, the Muslims just dug a deep trench. The Meccans made camp, but the weather was terrible. Pouring rain put out their fires and howling winds blew down their tents. Eventually they gave up and went back to Mecca. It was all a bit embarrassing. They were losing the respect of the local tribes who were flocking to join the Muslims. So a peace treaty was signed at Hudaybiyah. But it wasn't long before the Meccans broke it. Muhammad decided that enough was enough. By now he had over 10,000 men, so he led them across the desert to Mecca. The ruling families realized they'd made a huge mistake, but it was too late. All they could do was surrender and hope that the Muslim army killed them quickly. But Muhammad said there should be no more fighting. He rode into Mecca and went straight to the Kaaba. He circled it 7 times anti-clockwise and smashed all the idols, rededicating the Kaaba to Allah. And that's why I'm not going to show you Muhammad. The Muslims wanted to make it totally clear that they only worship the one unseen God. So they didn't have any pictures of Muhammad in case anyone thought he was an idol, and they didn't have any pictures of Allah because he's like nothing on earth, so it would be impossible to draw him anyway. So there you go, how Islam began in under 10 minutes. How did I do?
Hinduism, the religion of over 1 billion people, is the world's oldest religion and probably the most confusing one to non-Hindus. Some say it isn't even a religion, more a way of life. Hindus themselves call it the Sanatana Dharma, the eternal tradition. So, what is Hinduism? Does YOLO apply to them? And who is this elephant guy? Well, let's find out. Hinduism is the world's oldest active religion. It's the result of the merging of the ancient Indus Valley civilization and the nomads that came into India around 1500 BC. Some scholars say it could even go back many more thousands of years. But we won't delve too deep into dates, because dates in Hinduism are very, very controversial. But one thing is certain, Hinduism is old, like at least 36 Betty Whites. Hinduism has been around for so long that it and the concept of India itself are inseparable. Hindu and India even come from the same word. Sanskrit was the ancient language of the Hindus, and the Sanskrit name for the Indus River is Sindhu. The ancient Persians who sat across the Indus tended to switch their S's to H's, so Sindhu became Hindu. So the people living across the river became Hindus. The Persians told the Greeks, who dropped that very not Greek-like H, stuck in a very Greek-like I to the end, and boom, India. Hinduism has a long, long history. But today we'll be focusing on just the core beliefs of Hindus because I don't have the willpower to animate a 3-hour-long video. Hindus are a diverse group. Some are strict, dedicating their lives to prayer, while others don't believe in any gods but still follow Hindu philosophy. To make things easier to understand, let's break Hinduism down into 7 core beliefs. So, here's my rap about the 7 Hindu beliefs.
You promised you weren't gonna do the rap. Come on, you're better than this, man.
Fine, here's the regular version then. 1. Belief in one universal soul. Hindus believe in a universal soul known as Brahman, a formless, genderless source of all reality. Brahman is the universe and the material that makes up the universe. It's a trippy concept, but think of Brahman as an ocean and everything else as drops propelling out of that ocean. Separate for a time, but still the same thing, if that makes sense. 2. Belief in an immortal individual soul. In Hinduism, souls are known as Atman. Actions of the soul while in a body have effects on that soul's next life. When you die, your soul moves to another new body. This is called transmigration. The kind of body the soul inhabits next is determined by karma. 3. Belief in karma. Karma is action, usually good or bad actions that affect society. For Hindus, karmic actions in the past affect us today, and our actions today affect our soul's future. 4. Belief in moksha. The goal in Hindu life is to somehow get back to Brahman. If a Hindu can do this, they will be freed from the cycle of life and death. This is called moksha. You can achieve moksha by realizing your oneness with Brahman. How you realize this is up to you. For this reason, Hindus pray, "Lead me from the unreal to the real." 5. Belief in the Vedas. The Vedas are Hindu sacred books of knowledge. There are 4 Vedas. Hindus believe that all 4 were divinely revealed to ancient Hindu sages. We'll take a closer look at the Vedas in a while. 6. Belief in cyclical time. For Hindus, there are no beginnings or endings. Time is a series of cycles, each cycle containing 4 ages or yugas. There's the Krita, the Treta, the Dwapara, and the Kali. Added together, the 4 yugas total about 4.32 million years. At the end of each cycle, declining human morality leads to the total destruction of reality. Hindus believe that we are in the 4th and final yug, Kali. 7. Belief in Dharma. Dharma is a difficult word to translate to English. Proper behavior is the best that I could come up with. Dharma maintains balance in the universe. As long as everything in the universe, like animals, plants, and humans, follow their Dharma, then everything will be fine. If they break from the Dharma though, things will be super not fine. Each being has its own Dharma. A lion's Dharma is to kill and eat antelope, a king's Dharma is to rule well, a subscriber's Dharma is to smash the like button and ring the notification bell. For humans, their specific Dharma is usually based on their age and their caste. An old priest will have a very different Dharma than a young merchant, for example. So those are the 7 core beliefs of Hinduism. With them, you can understand the Hindu mindset. Unlike Christianity or Islam, Hinduism is a non-profit organization. There is no Jesus or Muhammad for Hindus. There is no Bible, Quran, or Torah. Instead, they have a bunch, and I mean a bunch, of different sacred texts. The 4 Vedas form the basis of the Hindu faith. So let's take a look at them. 1. The Rig Veda. The Rig Veda is a collection of songs that praise and discuss ideas like truth, reality, and the universe, along with discussions on war, weddings, and rituals. 2. The Yajurveda. The Yajurveda covers stuff such as sacrificial rites and rituals. 3. The Samaveda. Sama literally means sweet song that destroys sorrow. It is mostly songs dedicated to praising gods. It's different than the rest of the Vedas because it's set to music. 4. The Atarveda. The Atarveda is my favourite one. Do you want to curse your enemies? Or charm that special someone? Maybe learn to invoke rain? Or discover herbal medicine along with tips on warfare? Like how to make poison arrows? Well, this Veda has you covered, along with a bunch of other charms and curses. It even has a curse against cursers. Avoid us, O curse, as a burning fire avoids a lake. Strike him here that curses us, as the lightning of heaven the tree. A link to the Atarveda is in the description, just in case you need a spell to get a wife or another to banish pigeons from your presence. It's great. After the Vedas come the Upanishads, which are like a sequel that makes the original make much more sense. They were probably written down between 800 BC and 500 BC, during a time when some Hindus started to question the Vedas. Their ideas became the Upanishads. The Upanishads are books on philosophy, like we would expect from Plato or Aristotle. They're all about questioning, doubt, debate, and finding the answers to life's difficult questions. A theme in the Upanishads is that people are not their minds, or bodies, or egos, but their Atman. Your soul is you. Everything else is unreal and temporary. After the holy texts like the Vedas and the Upanishads are other less divine but still important texts. These include stuff like the Puranas, the Bhagavad Gita, and the Ramayana and the Mahabharata. The Puranas are like encyclopedias of Hindu beliefs. There are 18 well-known Puranas. The Puranas cover things from yoga, to army organization, to taxation, to the caste system, to hell, gods, and everything in between. The Bhagavad Gita, Gita for short, is one of Hinduism's most important texts. The Gita takes place on a battlefield where Arjuna, a great warrior, refuses to fight. Lord Krishna steps in to urge Arjuna to fight, and their discussion covers things such as Dharma and how to live your best life. Arjuna eventually fought after Lord Krishna taught him the truth about Dharma. As a member of the warrior caste, Arjuna's Dharma was to fight against evil. The lesson of the Gita is that everyone faces difficult choices, but they must act on them according to their Dharma, no matter how unpleasant. Along with all these philosophical texts, Hinduism has 2 action-packed epics, the Ramayana and the Mahabharata. The Ramayana, the earlier of the 2 texts, tells the story of Prince Rama. In the epic, you find out about his 14-year-long exile, the abduction of his wife Sita, his battle with the evil demon Ravana, and his awesome monkey sidekick Hanuman. The second epic, the Mahabharata, is the longest poem in the world, 5 times the length of the Bible and 8 times the length of the Iliad and Odyssey combined. It rivals any soap opera you've ever seen when it comes to drama. Murder, betrayal, love murder, and giant battles. The Mahabharata has it all. The theme running through the Ramayana and the Mahabharata is that Dharma must be followed for society to function. In Hinduism, there are 4 goals a person should aim for to have a good life. The first of these is Dharma, followed by Artha, the pursuit of prosperity and good reputation, kama, pleasure both in body and in mind, and moksha, the release from the cycles of rebirth. Hindus should practice artha and kama with dharma in order to achieve moksha. There are also 6 temptations Hindus should try and avoid. Kama, lust and materialism. This kama is different from the good kama mentioned above, I know. Next is kruda, which is anger, lobha, which is greed, moha, which is unrealistic attachment to things, people and power, mada, which is pride, and matsarya, which is jealousy. By following their dharma and avoiding these 6 temptations, a Hindu can break the cycle of rebirth and have their soul merge back into Brahman. But even though everything comes from Brahman, who is the one real thing in Hinduism, Hindus do, after all, have thousands of gods. So let's take a look at them. First, there's Brahma, the creator. He created everything in the universe, but he is not the universe itself, because that's Brahman. They aren't the same thing. That last letter changes a lot, apparently. He has 4 heads. The heads face each of the 4 directions to represent the 4 Vedas, which he created, and the 4 yugas. He also holds a book, which represents knowledge. Oh, and he rides a giant swan because he's just fancy. His consort is Saraswati, the goddess of learning. Vishnu, the preserver, is the second member of the Hindu trinity. He preserves the world created by Brahma until it is eventually destroyed by Shiva. He holds a discus, which he uses to cut down anyone that tries to mess with his dharma, along with a conch, which symbolizes victory and the 5 elements. Vishnu has many avatars, such as Krishna or Rama, who he uses to defend dharma on earth. Oh, and he rides a giant eagle named Garuda. Vishnu has 2 consorts, the goddess Lakshmi and Bhudevi. Bhudevi is the earth goddess and Lakshmi is the goddess of good fortune and wealth. Next is Shiva the Destroyer, the 3rd member of the Hindu trinity. It's his job to destroy the universe in order to prepare for its renewal at the end of each cycle of time. The most identifiable of his features is his 3rd eye, which he almost always keeps closed. If he does open it and you're in front of him, then you will have your face melted off. When not unmaking existence, Shiva enjoys long walks with his bull named Nandi. At the end of the Kali Yuga, the 4th age of the world, Shiva will perform a dance that destroys the universe. Which is odd because people have told me that my dance moves make them wish the world would end. So me and Shiva have quite a lot in common. Parvati and Sati are Shiva's consorts. Shiva also has 2 sons, Ganesha and Murugan. Ganesha is worshipped as the remover of obstacles, and Murugan is the god of war. Ganesha holds a very special place in the heart of Hindus, due to him being the remover of obstacles. The elephant head is the most obvious clue to identifying him. He was actually born with a human head, but after Shiva cut that one off, he kind of had to make do with an elephant one. If you're Christian or Muslim, you're aware that your religion has a bunch of different denominations, like Catholics or Protestants, Sunni and Shia. Hinduism has these too. Hindus developed 4 major denominations, some of which have their own subdivisions. The Vaishnavas primarily worship Vishnu and Shaivas primarily worship Shiva and his sons. Smartas follow sacred texts like the Puranas, the Ramayana and the Mahabharata rather than the Vedas. They worship 5 gods and goddesses, Ganesha, Durga, Surya, Shiva and a preferred avatar of Vishnu. Finally, Shaktas worship the goddess Devi. Shaktas see Devi as the ultimate and eternal reality, like a feminine Brahman. Even though there are all these variations and more, the core beliefs of Hindus remain mostly the same. Hindus believe that Dharma keeps the balance in the universe. If the scales between good and evil start tipping towards evil, then something needs to intervene to fix the universe's Dharma. This divine intervention is known as an avatar. The literal meaning of the word avatar is descent. Avatars are gods that descend to Earth to intervene whenever help is needed to restore Dharma. For example, when the Earth was dragged underneath the ocean, Vishnu descended to Earth as the avatar Varaha, a boar, and dragged the Earth back out. In other cases, Vishnu was born on Earth as a human avatar like Rama or Krishna, where he spent his avatar's life fixing Dharma. So, the caste system. If you only know one thing about Hinduism, this is probably it. People see it as an oppressive system that locks people in place based on their birth. And for a huge part of history, that's what it's been, unfortunately. Let's do a quick explanation of what the caste system is. In Hinduism, there are 4 castes or classes that you can be born into. There's the Brahmin, the priest, the Kshatriyas, the warriors, the Vaishyas, the traders, and the Shudras, the manual labourers. The main basis for the caste system can be found in the Bhagavad Gita and the Rig Veda. Krishna says in the Gita, "I have created a 4-fold system in order to distinguish among one's qualities and functions." The Rig Veda also refers to the 4 castes. It says humans were created from parts of the god Purusha, the Brahmin from his face, the Kshatriya from his arms, the Vaishya his thighs, and the Shudra his feet. This system was supposed to assign people functions based on their abilities, not their birth. If someone had the qualities of a Brahmin or a Vaishya, they could fill those roles. The Gita didn't restrict movement among castes, and the caste system functioned as intended for a while, until a document known as the Laws of Manu came about around the 5th century BC, popularly referred to as the Manusmriti. They created hard rules for Hindu life. 2 rules presented in it contributed to the way the caste system turned out. Manu states that the Brahmin were the lords of all castes, and he forbid moving among the castes. The caste you were born into was now the caste you're stuck in. If you give humans a hierarchy, they'll exploit it, and things will go sour pretty quickly. As time passed, Hindus began thinking in terms of upper and lower castes. Soon, cleaning toilets, tanning leather, and dealing with meat products were thought to be impure. The people doing those jobs became untouchables, the lowest of the low, a people without caste. And the rest is history. The modern world has brought many changes though. Now Hindus mix freely while working together in the same businesses, attending the same schools, and generally just living together. But when it comes to marriage, many Hindus still stick to their own caste. But this too is changing, and on Hindu dating websites you can actually see people list a non-preference for caste. It'll say caste no bar. So those are the basics of Hinduism. It isn't even close to covering everything. One video simply can't do it. Hinduism is too diverse, too deep, and means too many different things to different people. But learning even the basics of this fascinating and ancient religion gives us an insight into the worldview of over 1 billion people, and I hope you enjoyed it.
About 2,000 years ago, in a far-flung province in the Middle East, a man emerged from the desert with a message. One that would radically alter the course of world events and come to define the lives of billions. Christianity is a monotheistic religion that centers on the teachings of Jesus Christ, believed to be the Son of an almighty universal God. It is through faith in Jesus Christ and his teachings that believers have access to God and the afterlife. The Christian religion began about 2,000 years ago in the province of Judea in the Middle East. It was a sect of the overarching religion at the time, Judaism, and originally had very few followers. What's known about Christianity's earliest days in the life of Jesus Christ comes from 4 books called the Gospels. The Gospels hold that Jesus was born in the 1st decade BC in the region of Judea. His father was named Joseph, and his mother was named Mary. According to tradition, Jesus was immaculately conceived by God. In some accounts, Jesus had been trained as a carpenter or a builder, but by the age of 30, he took to preaching, saying that forgiveness of past sins was the key to achieving righteousness. However, the Jewish religious leaders and Roman rulers of the region declared Jesus an agitator. They had him arrested and crucified, nailed to a wooden cross, and left to die. But the story of Jesus doesn't end with his death. According to the Gospels, the body of Jesus was resurrected by God, his Father. If Jesus had built the foundations of the Christian faith, it was a Greek-speaking Jew named Paul who made it a religion. According to Paul, God revealed Jesus Christ to him in a vision. Paul then converted to Christianity and made it his mission to see Christ's teachings as an institution by establishing churches across the Roman Empire. Paul's actions catapulted Christians from an esoteric Jewish sect to a society of worshippers with reach across the known world. Over the next 2 millennia, Christianity would go through an unprecedented journey. Scriptures such as the Gospels would be gathered and translated to form Christianity's sacred text, the Bible. The Christian faith would branch into many denominations and be practiced by followers on all 7 continents. And the number of Jesus Christ's followers would grow to 2 billion, making Christianity the world's largest religion. While religious practice, ritual, and tradition have changed according to the spiritual needs and desires of its billions of adherents worldwide, a man from Judea's simple message of peace and forgiveness remains just as powerful now as it did 2,000 years ago.
Rituals. Religions have rituals, which include ceremonies that reenact sacred stories, and various activities, such as songs and dances that express praise or thanksgiving to God, gods, or a revered teacher or prophet.
I'm about to have an audience with a living embodiment of the Hindu god Teleju. My hope is that the Kumari remains expressionless. Even the hint of a smile is said to bring misfortune. She didn't smile. As a matter of fact, she didn't have an expression at all.
Okay.
So that's good for me, right?
That's a good thing.
All right. And I also noticed that her feet were up on a little platform.
Yes. So while she is the Kumari, she should not touch the earth, and so she will be carried around.
I see.
And so she gets carried around in a palanquin.
Yeah.
Even when she has to go to festivals and to attend other rituals in the city.
This royal treatment isn't required merely out of respect for the divine. It avoids her receiving cuts to her feet. If she bleeds, she ceases to be a goddess. Of course, that day can only be put off so long. With the onset of puberty, this young girl must return to a way of life that may now be alien to her. It seemed like this would be kind of a rough deal for a kid.
It is a rough deal, for a kid, but I think in this part of the world, we are constantly reminded about our duty.
Yes.
And so in, sort of the years to come, then people take great pride in the fact that she was able to serve her community by taking on this duty.
And after she's no longer a goddess, what is she?
Once she reaches puberty, then the community begins to search, for a second child, who will replace her. She enters the regular family, and
She's
I think
become just a regular
girl.
Got it.
Artistic expressions. Religions engage in various artistic expressions for their beliefs. These artistic expressions can be in the form of music, dance, architectural design, sculpture, poetry, drama, and others. In fact, many of the world-renowned artistic works were religiously inspired.
It's only been the last few hundred years or so that Western civilization has been putting art in museums. At least museums resembling the public institutions we know today. Before this, for most, art served other purposes. What we call fine art today was in fact primarily how people experienced an aesthetic dimension of religion. Paintings, sculpture, textiles, and illuminations were the media of their time, supplying vivid imagery to accompany the stories of the day. In this sense, Western art shared a utilitarian purpose with other cultures around the world, some of whose languages, incidentally, have no word for art. So how do we define what we call art? Generally speaking, what we're talking about here is work that visually communicates meaning beyond language, either through representation or the arrangement of visual elements in space. Evidence of this power of iconography, or ability of images to convey meaning, can be found in abundance if we look at art from the histories of our major world religions. Almost all have, at one time or another in their history, gone through some sort of aniconic phase. Aniconism prohibits any visual depiction of the divine. This is done in order to avoid idolatry, or confusion between the representation of divinity and divinity itself, keeping it real, so to speak, in the relationship between the individual and the divine. However, this can be a challenge to maintain, given that the urge to visually represent and interpret the world around us is a compulsion difficult to suppress. For example, even today, where the depiction of Allah or the Prophet Muhammad is prohibited, an abstract celebration of the divine can still be found in arabesque patterns of Islamic textile design, or the masterful flourishes of brushwork in Arabic calligraphy, where the words of the Prophet assume a dual role as both literature and visual art. Likewise, in art from the early periods of Christianity and Buddhism, the divine presence of the Christ and the Buddha do not appear in human form, but are represented by symbols. In each case, iconographic reference is employed as a form of reverence. Anthropomorphic representation, or depiction in human form, eventually became widespread in these religions only centuries later, under the influence of the cultural traditions surrounding them. Historically speaking, the public appreciation of visual art in terms other than traditional religious or social function is a relatively new concept. Today, we fetishize the fetish, so to speak. We go to museums to see art from the ages, but our experience of it there is drastically removed from the context in which it was originally intended to be seen. It might be said that the modern viewer lacks the richness of engagement that she has with contemporary art, which has been created relevant to her time and speaks her cultural language. It might also be said that the history of what we call art is a conversation that continues on as our contemporary present passes into what will be some future generation's classical past. It's a conversation that reflects the ideologies, mythologies, belief systems, and taboos, and so much more of the world in which it was made. But this is not to say that work from another age made to serve a particular function in that time is dead or has nothing to offer the modern viewer. Even though, in a museum setting, works of art from different places and times are presented alongside each other, isolated from their original settings, their juxtaposition has benefits. Exhibits are organized by curators, or people who've made a career out of their ability to recontextualize or remix cultural artifacts in a collective presentation. As viewers, we're then able to consider the art in terms of a common theme that might not be apparent in a particular work, until you see it alongside another, and new meanings can be derived and reflected upon. If we're so inclined, we might even start to see every work of art as a complementary part of some undefined, unified whole of past human experience, a trail that leads right to our doorstep and continues on with us, open to anyone who wants to explore it.
Activity. Please write your answers on your notebook for the following. 1. Take a look again at the definitions of religion given by some scholars. Among these definitions, which for you best captures the meaning of religion? Why? 2. Which among the key elements of religion do you think is the most important and the least important? Explain your answers. 3. Choose a world-renowned work of art considered to be religiously inspired. Explain on writing the specific religious inspiration of the artist behind the artwork. That would be all for our session today. Hanggang sa muli nating pagkikita. God bless you all.